talking about the effective strategies that you found different between elite students and more amateur students. So what did you find in your findings between the two?
Well, at that point, I decided that I couldn't find out everything I needed to know from a questionnaire, and that I needed to really talk in depthly to musicians about what they experience and how they experience it. And I decided at that point then to do my research with expert musicians to find out what they do and their experience of flow or their experience of performance, and how they prepare psychologically for performance and for experiences of flow. But just on the elite students, or which is what I call them in that piece of research, and they were third level students. They were called elite, but they were students who were now at third level preparing to be professional musicians. And at that point, I suppose it was interesting to me, because what I found was that the elite students were actually experiencing flow less often than what I call the amateur students, i.e. kind of primary and second level students who weren't yet preparing to be professional musicians, but maybe they had it in mind that that's what they were going to do, but they were still in school. So I thought it was interesting that the students who were now preparing to be professional musicians were experiencing flow less. And obviously there were a lot of other factors now coming into play, a lot of other pressures coming into play for students who were really training hard to be professional musicians. So I decided to talk to expert musicians at that point and find out more about what are they doing. And do they actually want to experience flow? Is it something they like? And do they set up the conditions? Do they know what to do to make it happen? And I felt that I found lots of really interesting things from expert musicians. And they do use a range of strategies. Many of those who I talked to, they did know what flow was. They had heard of it, they'd experienced it, they liked it. So it's kind of one of those experiences or phenomenons that it's a little bit addictive, maybe. And people do kind of chase it. They want it to happen because it does feel so amazing, and people play at their best whenever they experience it. So often people do kind of look for it to happen and find ways to make it happen. But it is also an elusive experience. So you can set up the conditions for it to happen, but it may not necessarily happen. But still, one of the things I love about knowing what musicians do, expert musicians do, to set up to try to make it happen, is that it's a really positive way of preparing for performance. So expert musicians actually do quite a lot of things in order to prepare psychologically. And if we all did that, then we would all be preparing for really positive experiences of performance. Whether it turns into flow or not probably doesn't really matter, because you're still going to perform really well and have a really nice experience, have a much more positive experience than you might have. So I found that some of the strategies that expert musicians were using were also strategies that are used in sports psychology and that have been looked at in performance science in general. So things like mental practice, extensive mental practice. Mental practice is maybe one of the key things that expert musicians use to prepare psychologically. I'll maybe come back to that. Other things where that they use visualization and imagery for kind of different reasons than mental practice. In a way, it's a similar thing, and maybe I'll come back to that.
Yeah.
But they use it for different purposes. They use positive self-talk, which is something we hear, I think, quite a lot about from sport again. Because I'm immersed in all of this, I'm not totally aware of how much other musicians know about sport and performance science. But self-talk is really important. Another one of the key things that makes a huge difference to performers and how they think about themselves and how they think about performance and how they talk to themselves, about their performance and about their preparation and about how they are going to play. They use what in sports psychology is called pre-performance routines. So expert musicians also have, some of them, very detailed routines that they carry out prior to performance. And for some people, that may just be the day of performance, and for other people, it could be for 2 weeks that they might have a 2 week, coming up to one, like maybe the start of a tour or a really important performance. that they have quite, detailed and even like 2 week long routines of things that they go through in order to prepare. One of the things that I found really interesting was the acceptance of the experience of both positive and negative emotions.
Mm.
So, great performers, really great musicians experiencing really quite a lot of fear and nervousness before performing, and particularly before flow, before experiencing amazing experiences like flow. People actually described sometimes feeling terrified,
Mm.
and but they had an approach to their nervousness and the fear or the terror that they might feel that was very accepting, that this is part of the process. It's a really important part of the process, and that it's something that has to be experienced in order actually to be able to perform well. And some people loving the feeling of fear and the
Mm.
feeling like for one person saying to me, I was about as terrified as it's possible to be, but I love being scared.
Yeah.
So um, um, there's this idea that there's obviously the taking on of the challenge, knowing that they're facing a challenge
Hmm.
and taking on that challenge, accepting this is a big deal, this is a big thing, and there's going to be a lot of things that I have to do in order to prepare for it. There's purposeful focus and absorption prior to the performance. So a build up over time of really purposely absorbing themselves in the music and really getting absolutely 100% focused on the music.
Mm.
And there's a couple of other things, but also, of course, there's the physical and musical preparation.
Hmm.
And interestingly, prior to flow, prior to this kind of peak experience during performance, expert musicians saying that they prepared, no stone was left unturned.
Hmm.
They did everything that they possibly could in order to feel ready. In psychology, we call it, or in sports, in performance science, it's called automatization of
Hmm.
skill. And that often involves a lot of memorization. And this is where mental practice comes in. I've had some musicians say to me that in relation to performance anxiety, the key way of dealing or coping with performance anxiety is using mental practice.
Mm.
And a lot of musicians would say that they're actually doing more mental practice in the days or weeks even before an important performance than they are doing physical practice. So and I suppose one of the things with experts, when you talk to experts, and research has found this in lots of different domains, is that experts often don't realize exactly what it is they're doing to prepare. And so for some students or other professional musicians, the idea of doing mental practice, it can be actually quite hard work at first.
Mm.
But experts who are using mental practice all the time, it almost just becomes, it's just part of what they do. They're almost not even aware anymore that they're
Mm.
really working hard. But when you first start to do a lot of mental practice and really using it effectively as it should be used, it can feel like quite hard work until you get really used to doing it and doing it effectively. And musicians, experts were using mental practice to practice technically difficult passages. They're using it for musical expression. They're using it to help them memorize if they need to memorize music. And they also use it to purposely focus and get themselves absorbed in the music. One of the things that we know from kind of neuroscience and from research in neuropsychology is that when we focus on something, it's not possible to think about two things at the same time.
Hmm.
So and we can direct our focus. Focus is like it's like a kind of a spotlight, a mental spotlight, and we have the ability. This is one of the things that we can control about performance. We have the ability to direct our mental spotlight onto whatever it is. So that could be your performance anxiety
Hmm.
and the negative thoughts that come with that, or it could be something where you're having a problem with motivation to practice, or it could be that you're having problems with focusing and you're distracted. But we have the ability to direct our mental spotlight onto whatever it is that we want. And expert musicians kind of do that by purposely focusing and absorbing themselves in the music, using mental practice to do that. So not only would they have the music, they say, in their head all the time,
Hmm.
but they're actually specifically practicing like from beginning to end of a piece mentally without, doing physical practice. So they would combine physical practice with mental practice, but they would spend maybe hours doing mental practice where they're not touching the instrument or not singing out loud, singing as their instrument. And they're not actually doing the physical thing, but they're doing it all in their head. And it's a brilliant way of, because sometimes, when you're playing, you can get carried away and you can play things on automatic. The
Mm.
knowledge becomes automatic on how to play something, and you can get carried away and not realize that if you were to think about that mentally, do you actually know every single thing? Because one of the things that happens to us in performance is that we start to second guess ourselves,
Mm.
or we start to question everything that we do. And depending on how the extent of our negative thoughts or negative concerns about our playing, we can actually, if it's quite severe, you can get totally carried away in the negativity or in the negative thoughts, and they can snowball, and you can get to the point of catastrophization where it starts to feel like nothing positive can happen at all in
Mm.
a situation. So with mental practice, it's a brilliant way of checking that you know every single note. You know exactly what you want to do with every single note. You know every breath, every finger, and the name of every note or chord, where every breath that you want to take, how your body, how you want it to feel with every
Mhm.
note, every sound that you want to make, and the type of sound that you want to make. And so mental practice is a really important, uh, crucial, maybe the best learning tool that we have for helping us to focus, helping us to practice things that are technically difficult, making sure we know things that we thought were easy, that suddenly sometimes in a performance we can suddenly start saying, oh my goodness, that was the easy bit, and that's where I made my mistake. I thought I knew that.
Mhm.
Um, and then people also use visualization and imagery. So for practicing coping with the feelings of nerves, to cope with the emotions and the maybe negative thoughts that come with anxiety before performing, and also again for focus and for musical expression or creative ideas in imagining how something should sound, or how something should feel, or how it should come across, how it should be communicated. And that's not just a visual imagery, it's how it feels, what you're hearing. I haven't heard people so much mention smell, but I'm sure for some people smell comes into it. But visualization, expert musicians actually spend time imagining in great detail what the performance situation is going to feel like, how exactly they are going to feel. So they imagine being backstage, they imagine getting dressed, putting on makeup or showering or polishing shoes or whatever it takes. That walk to, to the back stage, to the stage door, the standing there, who's out there, what it's going to feel like,
Mhm.
who's in the audience, what kind of audience, what size of audience, um, and summoning up all the emotions and thoughts that come with imagining that. And then, and some people are really good at that. Some people can immediately suddenly feel, feel the tension or feel the nervousness or the apprehension or the excitement. Some people can really feel that instantly. And for others, it takes a little bit more work and a little bit more practice in order to do that. And then what expert musicians do is then they will actually use their instrument then, having got themselves kind of having simulated that, the performance state, then they use that to actually see, can they, and pretend they're performing, pretend they're, it's like simulation, pretending they're actually there in front of the audience, and and then testing, what is it that I can really play, what is it that is maybe unnerved by the setting and the emotions that are felt. And some people carry out mental practice, then maybe they'll
Mm.
mentally play through it and check, having summoned up all those feelings of nerves and excitement, can they mentally go through the piece note by note, chord by chord? Do they check that they know absolutely everything? And I suppose one of the interesting things there is about the positive and negative emotions that expert performers feel before performances. That, and again, this has been found in the sport research, that everybody has their own individual optimal state of being prior to performance. So there isn't one correct way that everybody should feel. You know, if somebody has experienced a lot of performance anxiety, or feeling distracted, or not able to focus, or not able to get themselves motivated, um, it's not that that's the wrong thing for them to feel, but what we all need to do, what musicians need to do then, is to look at and kind of analyze, based on past performances, what were optimal states for them, because some of us need to feel really nervous,
Mm.
and in fact, for flow to happen, it seems that people need to feel really scared in order to flip that fear. Along with all the other strategies, they can flip that fear into a really good experience. But also, just in general, to perform well, we need to care. You know, we need to feel nervous, and people who don't care about something don't feel nervous, and then, you know, a performance isn't a really positive performance. So we do need the nerves. Some people need to feel angry. Some people need to feel irritated or determined, or others need to feel really calm and collected and focused. And so different people need to feel different
Different
emotions. And
things,
some of
yeah.
those emotions are emotions that we perceive to be negative, but actually, in terms of performance, they might be emotions that are actually, you know, that we need in order to perform at our best.